What's up, my Power Riders crew? Hey, I'm just gonna be straight and honest with you. I'm not gonna hide this. I messed up, and right there is the fix. Allow me to explain. Come on. Okay, so this is my e-brake cable. Look, right there. See all that black stuff? That was when this cable got so hot that the inner lining was melting through the sleeve. So how would an e-brake cable get hot? Well, if y'all watched my last video, you'll see that I was testing my wireless remote for my winch. I was tightening the cable on the drum, and as I was pulling the Jeep, it was just a gradual uphill, just the Jeep's way, because that's all you want to do whenever you're tightening up the winch cable on the drum. And I kept seeing smoke coming underneath the Jeep, but in a very weird place. So I looked at my e-brake cable, and that sucker was just smoking like crazy, dripping, the drip coming out of it. I mean, it got hot. That instantly told me I had a ground problem. So whenever I stopped the winch, the smoking, the melting of the liner and all that stuff, it would stop. I start the winch back up after a moment or two, the smoking and everything started again. So that told me I had a serious ground problem with my winch. So how did I have a ground problem? Come here. Look real close. Right there's the bolt. Around this side. Here's my onboard air port, and getting here a little closer, there's the boat. But do you see a cable anywhere? Yeah, I totally forgot to put a ground cable on it, and that does not end well. So I'm gonna use a 13mm. I'm gonna get that bolt out of there, get it cleaned up, and see if there's some way I can clean up that contact point at the bottom of the winch so my ground cable gets a good connection. Yeah, I can't believe I did that. See how cruddy that is? Probably get my bench grinder out and the brush, clean that bolt up real good. And as far as up inside there, get me a wire brush and see if I can get I got a round file. Maybe I can get inside there enough to clean that up. I'll let you know what I did when I get done, when I figure it out. Right there is where the ground hits my block. Come on, focus. Okay, you see the nut right there. That is where the ground comes off the battery to my block, and that cable right there, the smaller cable, goes to the body of the Jeep. But I get in here and I realize something. I don't have a frame ground, and that is a no-no. So what I'm going to do is two things. I'm going to run a dedicated ground from the winch, but I'm going to make me another ground to go from there to the frame. And just for the record, I'd already cleaned it, but that little shot right there was just for the camera to show you guys how I did that. Now, I would have preferred to have a little sanding drum or maybe even a wire brush or something like that, but how my little sanding drums are kind of worn out, so they're kind of useless, and that was there, so I used it. And it's cleaned up pretty good. It'll get the job done. The bolt, I put it on a wire brush, cleaned it up real good, so we should be good. Put the cable on and snake it back to the block. And there we go. Got her all tightened up. Now run my cable back to where I'm going to ground it at and cut her off. So here's the ground cable coming from the winch. You notice I've got a little drop in it right here, but there's a reason for that. It runs over top of the horn right here for the motor mount, right there, and then it comes up to there. So I can zoom in for you. Right there, you can see the bolt at the end of my finger right there. That's your ground. So my thought is, since I don't have a frame ground as well, I'm going to take this one cable, I'm going to terminate right there on the block, because that heavy cable coming off that bolt right there goes up to the negative side of the battery. That'll give me a ground cable. Zoom back. That'll give me a ground cable come from off the block here down to the frame, and I'll probably tie it into my bump stop right here. Simply because bump stop bolt is not structural or anything like that. It's easy enough to get to. I mean, another option would be like, pull that plug out right there and tap that for a bolt, but I mean, that's really unnecessary work. I could take the bolt out of the bump stop, clean up the metal and everything, terminate this, put two ends on this, two lugs, and just put it right there on that bolt, and that'll give me a frame ground, and it'll allow this to come back, ground to this, ground to the block, which then goes back up to the negative side of the battery. So that's my plan. So I remember where to cut. Always keep a Sharpie on you. It's so handy. I worked with a fellow named Kenny. He was the HVAC guy at where I work at now, and he retired some time back. He always kept a Sharpie on him all the time. The air handlers, I mean, we got huge air handlers we deal with. He would write down the belt sizes. The only thing, if you had to change out a set of belts on an air handler or filters or anything, you walked up, looked at the side of the air handler, and said, you need ABC belt and you need XYZ filter, blah, 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 blah. You didn't have to guess, you didn't have to open the air handler, and he wrote down the quantities and everything. So keeping Sharpies on you whenever you're doing any kind of work, I picked up that habit from him, and it's super handy. So moved the bump stop out of the way, took my sanding drum that has officially fallen off my drill somewhere. Anyway, I had a sanding drum on my drill a moment ago, and scrubbed that down to the metal. While I was at it, went ahead and knocked off all that rust that was underneath this right here and hit it with a little bit of paint. Now I'm going to take this, I want it directly to the frame, then I'll bolt the bump stop over top of that. You'll see. Now we have ground cables hooked directly to the frame, and the bump stop is good and tight. Get you some black paint, that way it kind of match your frame obviously. Spray up around there, spray in there, that way you seal up any kind of bare metal area. But tighten this up good first before you paint it. Therefore you get no paint between the contacts of the frame and the end of your lugs. So right there's the cable heading up that way, and now I got tied to the block way up yonder. Well, the nut holding all this stuff on is a 10mm, but it's actually also a stud that holds. It's also a stud that holds your dipstick tube in place. So once I get that 10mm off, now I can get the rest of the electrical off, the grounds that's been established, and definitely clean those while I've got it apart. And I'm going to go ahead and pull that stud on out of there and clean it while I'm at it. Took a wire brush on a drill, cleaned that up, make sure you got good contact surfaces to the block and all the electrical stuff. These washers I'm using, again, wire brush. That nut, you see how shiny that is? Again, wire brush. But up here, I got to get down in here. See right there, we got a little bit of corrosion. I'm going to get the wire brush on a drill, clean that up as well. And this is going to the negative side of the battery. And not in bad shape, honestly. But if you got it off, clean it. Therefore, you know you got good contact. They need to pay me another valve cover. The paint coming off that one. Much more shiny. And get down here for this one. Much better. And then my new ground cable is like down yonder somewhere. Right there. Put it all back together again. Now as you put your cables back together on the side of the block, make sure that your battery cable, the negative coming from the battery, and the cable going to the frame that we installed down there, making sure they're the ones touching together. Then the one that goes to the chassis, the one that had the crib connector on, crib connector ring, put it probably back next to the block or something like that, as long as it's in the stack somewhere. But be sure that the battery cable and the chassis ground that's going to the frame, they need to be touching. Therefore, they got the best contacts possible. And there we go. It's all put together. Now, down in the comments, I'll probably catch a little bit of slack for this, and I understand why, okay? Because people have different ways of doing things. Not that all of it's wrong, not that all of it's right. It's just different ways. Meaning, oftentimes people will go from the battery to the frame, frame to the engine, engine to the body as your ground circuit, or they'll go from battery to frame, frame to engine, then frame to body, you know, another way of running your ground. Or in my case, I went from battery to engine, engine to body, then now I've got one from engine to frame. Now in the case of the winch, going from battery to frame, frame to winch, of course then coming off the frame to the engine and chassis. The advantage I see going directly to the frame like that, if you found a bolt that you could really crank down on, that will squeeze your battery cable and your winch cable together tighter, therefore you get a better ground contact per se. The way I've got it, going from battery to engine, that bolt I've got it on, it's always worked fine, but I've had this winch for a while, and if you guys have been following my videos here lately, I just kind of put this winch together, or actually got it working here recently. And so It was my fault that I missed the ground to the winch, but I also didn't realize I didn't have a ground from the frame to the motor. Now we got all that. So that being said, let's go back up to the property and do a couple winch pulls, see if we corrected this issue. So did we get that ground issue fixed? Well, let's find out. Tree saver set up, Jeep sitting right there. I need to back her up. Disengage the clutch, grab the rope. At the beginning of the video, I was running cable, but hey, in the beauty of video editing, I'm running rope now. Let's go hook her up. Oops, forgot to engage the clutch. Okay. Turn on the remote and let's go. Turn on the winch. Turn on the remote and let's go. It is so much faster than it was. I'm going to hold the button. We're going to see what happens. But I can tell you that it is so much faster. Of course it would be, because the only way that the winch was getting this ground was going through the emergency brake cable. We added those grounds, we're good to go. Well, so far so good. Alright, let's go back and look, see if it's smoking again. Alright. She's squeaky. Okay, for a second, I'm going to stop it so I can jump in. We're going to look at the voltmeter real quick. Flip the camera. Okay, we've been making a little bit of a pull, so the voltage is down a little bit. All right, ready to go again? Let's hit it. Now we've got the Jeep at just idling. No throttle, no nothing, just idle. Need to turn my steering wheel a little bit. The volts definitely dropped, so it kind of makes me believe researching a dual battery setup may not be a bad idea. Woo, here we go, here we go. We're rolling again. Alright, we're gonna check our cable real quick. Not even warm. And we're getting proper wrap. So I think proper lighting. So I think that pretty much concludes that we have corrected that ground issue. And so I'm gonna wrap my cable on up right over there, that tree line, there's some hills to play on. I'm gonna go play. Always hook up your grounds, especially to the winch, because it does some really weird things when it don't have a ground. Now you may be asking, hey, if it didn't have a ground, how did it work to begin with? This is the winch motor. This joins onto this plate here. This plate right here is bolted to the bumper. The bumper is bolted to the frame. But as mentioned earlier, the frame didn't have a ground attached to it. So the e-brake cable, the way it is ran, it comes off the body, like where you push down your pedal on your left side right there. You've got a potential contact point right there. It comes down, exits out of the body, then it exits down to the frame right there. But here's the cable that goes to the body. So it comes off here, runs up through there, and goes into right here. Notice, it joins the frame. So, with old crusty YJ stuff, as crusty as it is, there was potential ground points coming all through here, coming off the body onto the frame. So the current was coming through the winch here, cycling into the e-brake cable, then going through the body. But the body had a ground, because you remember that old ring that's on the side of the block? Right there. So kids, what'd you learn today? That's right. Always check your grounds. Grounds can cause issues with your winch, obviously, but a lot of other things. So always check your grounds. Everyone, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, hit that thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't. Leave us cool comments down below. Peace. Later, y'all.